I'm going to ask Mel Pender to come up and make the introduction of our speaker today. Mel's a longtime member and actually knows our speaker today.
You know, it gives me a great pleasure to stand here today to introduce a good friend, a great leader, an American hero. Ben Malcom was my battalion commander, 82nd Airborne Division, after I came back from the Olympics in 1968. After my first tour, my second tour between there to Vietnam. And I learned so much from this colonel. Colonel Malcom was a great leader. He was just not a leader. He was like a father to all the men in the battalion. We had the greatest battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division. It was nobody could touch us. And I was the best company commander. Hoorah, okay, hoorah, all right. But, you know, I just want to say that I haven't seen Colonel Malcom since, I guess since I left the Army, and when I was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was inducted to the Hall of Fame, and I hadn't seen him in quite a while. No, I think it was the OCS Hall of Fame. When I first seen him, I hadn't seen him since then, since Fort Bragg. And then I saw him again when I was inducted to another Hall of Fame, which is going to be in Sloppy Ford Building. I keep inducting all these Hall of Fames. I tell you, I don't know why, but I guess I'm just damn good. But, oh yeah, very humble, very humble. I'm airborne all the way, all right? But, you know, he came to my house for a house blessing last week, and him and his beautiful girlfriend, Colonel Malcom was 87, got a girlfriend, y'all. And he plays, he plays handball 7 days a week. And I just don't know if I'm 78, and to play handball, I couldn't play 7 days a week. I can only play golf once a week. But Colonel Malcom is a great man. You know, he went to college at North Georgia College. He's from Monroe, Georgia. He's a Georgia boy. He got a degree from political science degree from University of Auburn University. He was 29 years in the Army. He served in Korea and also in Vietnam. He was battalion commander, 82nd Airborne Division. Again, he wrote a book, and I'm telling you, you must read this book. I mean, this man has done some things that is unimaginable that somebody would do. I asked him, well, why aren't you a general? I'm not going to tell you what he told me, but I understand, because I had some commanders just like he was trying to tell me about. You get some good ones, you get some bad ones, and some of them don't like to give you good ratings. But he should have been a 5-star general for all the things this man has gone through. You know, Channel 5 did I think it was Historic Channel did a documentary on his book. And if you see the documentary and then read the book, or read the book and see the documentary of this man, you know, I keep saying this because I want to be just like him. I want to be like Audie Murphy in the movie To Hell and Back. I want to win all the medals. But he should have had every medal to be given. He had the Bronze Star, he had Combat Infantry Badge, Aviation Medal, Airborne Badge. He had 4 awards of Legion of Merit. He lives in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I can talk about him all day, but Colonel Ben Malcom.
Thank you, Mel. That's going to be hard to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate being invited as your guest speaker today. Our subject today is Special Forces and the CIA during the Korean War. We need to take a brief look back in history to see why it was necessary to form the CIA and Special Forces in the first place. Because neither one of these organizations were operational during World War II. During World War II, we had OSS, Office of Strategic Services. They were the CIA and Special Forces during World War II. Unfortunately, President Truman terminated OSS in 1945. But in 1947, Congress formed the Central Intelligence Agency. They gave the CIA roughly 60% of the missions from OSS, World War II. They gave the other 40% to the Department of the Army for Special Forces unconventional warfare. Well, the Pentagon did not see a need for Special Forces in 1947, did not form Special Forces. So when the Korean War started, 25 June 1950, and we needed special forces, they weren't available. 6 months into the Korean War, we discovered over 10,000 North Koreans fighting 100 to 150 miles behind the lines as guerrillas and partisans, trying to overthrow the North Korean government. We made contact with those people. They requested weapons, ammunition, supplies, and Americans to come in and lead them and train them. They only had one weapon per 10 men, and yet they were still fighting. They hated the communist form of government they'd been subjected to. So 8th Army saw the advantage of 10,000 people fighting behind the lines. So they quickly organized the first Special Forces unit in the Army in January 1951, 6 months into the Korean War. They reached out, picked up a few lieutenants like myself coming through the pipeline, gave us a minimum amount of training with a special OSS team that they set up. When I say minimum amount of training, they trained me for 2 weeks and shipped me 150 miles behind the lines in North Korea. I was 150 miles behind the lines in North Korea. I was commanding an 800-man guerrilla battalion. I was the only American with that unit. And we had those type of units located all over North Korea. As a result of that, we had some great operations going on over there. Now let's take a quick look at some films I brought out. Let's see the first film. This first film shows on the right-hand side is the Middle East. In the center of the United States, on the left-hand side, is the Far East. Now, we were starting to get involved in 3 wars in 1950 in the Far East. We were involved in the Korea War, 25 June 1950 to July 1953. We lost 36,576 Americans killed in that war. But also, we were starting in 1950 to get involved in the Vietnam War. We were supporting the French in Vietnam. President Truman made a decision that he didn't discuss with Congress to provide weapons, ammunition, supplies, and airplanes to the French. The CIA went in the airline business in 1950, unknown to Congress for 23 years. CIA went out and formed some 31 different companies to run their top operations. Here's a list of all 31 companies. Now, most people know that Air America was one of those companies, but most people do not know who the other 30 companies were. Just to name a few: Civil Air Transport, Intermountain Air, Pacific Air, Air Asia, and Southern Air out of Atlanta, Georgia. Some of you may have flown Southern Air, never realizing it was on lock, stock, and barrel by the CIA. They had several of those airlines. They also collected money from the passengers. Then they used that money to buy planes, to replace the planes they had. So as a result, that operation continued. So as a result, they supported the French from 1950 to 1954, when the French were finally defeated at Dien Bien Phu. We lost a lot of people during that period of time, and also with the CIA Airlines in Vietnam. We lost a total of 262 pilots, co-pilots, administrative personnel was killed flying during that period of time. As a result of that, by 1965, after Tet Offensive fell, by 1965, we had the first American troops on the ground as advisors. 200 showed up in 1955. I was there in 64, 65 as an advisor with the 23rd Vietnamese Division at Tuet. And I was also working as a point of contact with the 5th Special Forces and also with the Mountain Yards. As a result of that operation, the President made a decision when the Tet Offensive took place to close up the U.S. forces in Vietnam, 1973. The last combat forces left, 1973. That's when the CIA did not need as many planes to fly in Vietnam. So as a result of that, they gradually started to pull out some of their people. Now, some of those people had been flying for the CIA for over 20 years. I've got a good friend, Jack Stiles, that lives in Peachtree City, Georgia. Jack Stiles was in the Air Force for 4 years, got out, joined the Navy, flew off aircraft carriers, had 70 combat missions supporting my operations in Korea. Jack got out, couldn't get a job, signed on with Civil Air Transport, never realizing it was a CIA airline for the first year. Then he operated with them for about 20 years. He's now got 27 years of total federal service, but he gets no retirement benefits because Congress never did declare those 30 companies as being a part of the CIA. As a result, we got 2 bills before Congress at the present time trying to get that corrected. We got one in the House, one in the Senate. but they've been up there 4 years, and it's not likely that they'll be approved this year. The third country that was involved was Tibet. We were involved in Tibet in 1950. We were involved in Tibet because the Dalai Lama was being invaded by China. So as a result, he requested we train some of his people. So as a result, we pulled some of his people out of Tibet and put them into Thailand. Then we flew them to Camp Hale, Colorado, where you see that little red dot on the map. There we trained them for 6 months, Camp Hale, Colorado, and jumped them back into Tibet. We ran that operation from 1950 to 1959, when China finally took over all of Tibet, and the Dalai Lama had to move to India. So you can see during that same period of time, 1950 to 53, the Korean War was going on. At that same time, we were supporting people from Tibet. Also, we were involved in the Vietnam War already at that point in time. That gives you just a quick rundown of some of the things that was taking place at that point in time. Now let's take a look at a Korean map. This map shows South Korea in light green down at the bottom of the map. In the center in light red is North Korea. Across the top is China. China has an 870-mile border with North Korea. Russia, on the corner up there, has a 17-mile border with North Korea. At the end of World War II, the United States and Russia could not decide where to put that country. So as a result, what to do with it. So as a result, they temporarily divided the country, that red line, the 38th parallel. As a result, the United States picked up responsibility for South Korea. Russia picked up responsibility for North Korea. Russia trained Mr. Kim Il-sung in Russia, brought him back, put him in charge of that country. He ran that country, which was a dictator, for more than 40 years. As a result of that operation, President Truman finally made a decision that at that point in time, he was going to get involved in that war. North Korea attacked South Korea on the 25 June 1950. It put the South Korean military force in full retreat back down the peninsula. President Truman made a decision within 24 hours to commit the U.S. into that war. He notified General MacArthur. He had troops on the ground in just a matter of a few days. But he forced us all the way back to the tip of the country around that little red arch down at the bottom of the map. We fought along that little red arch around Pusan for 2.5 months. We lost 3,440 Americans killed in that short period of time. Like I said, during the Korean War, we lost 36,576 Americans killed during that war. In Vietnam, we lost 58,198 killed. Almost 95,000 killed in those two wars. MacArthur made his landing at Incheon on 15 September of 1950. Proceeded to cut the country in half in just a matter of a few days. It put the North Koreans in full retreat back out of Pusan, all the way back to the Yellow River. You see the little white jagged line. That's how far we penetrated into North Korea before China entered that conflict. We actually reached the Yellow River at that location and at that location before China attacked across the Yellow River in September of 1950 with over 260,000 troops. It caught the U.S. and the UN totally by surprise. It put them in full retreat back out of North Korea, the Yellow River, all the way back to that line. It says 25 January, all the way back through Seoul. We finally got organized, started fighting back to the north, was able to get back on the DMZ, that red line. We fought along that red line for about 27 months. During that 27 months is when we had the special forces behind the lines in North Korea conducting that operation. I reported into Seoul as a first lieutenant. I reported into Colonel Vanderpool, who was in charge of the guerrilla division of the 82 40th Army Unit. He said at that time he had 5 different activities going on in North Korea at that time. He had Leopard Base, control level operation from the Yellow River down the Yongjin Peninsula. Had 11 units. He said, that's where you're going to be assigned. He said, you are probably going to be commanding one of those 11 units. And I was. He said, also, we got the Wolfpack from Leopard Base down the front line, 10 units. On the other coast, we got Kirkland. Kirkland, on the east coast, we only have 4 islands that we could use as springboards to put people in and out of North Korea. On the west coast, we got 400 islands from the Seoul all the way up to the Yellow River. We controlled about 50% of those islands most of the time. We were fighting for those islands just like they did in World War II. He said, we got an interesting unit on the front line. They're called the line crossers. These were all North Korean refugees that came out of North Korea by the thousands. We picked up the best of the best and assigned 25 back of each American division. Put a little Korean village there. We put a wire fence around it. We put a Special Forces officer and NCO in that compound with those 25 so we could train them. On a given night, we would take 5 to 9 of those North Korean refugees, put them in North Korean uniforms, North Korean weapon, North Korean ID card, which we fabricated, and lead them through the American lines so they wouldn't get shot. Turn them loose into North Korea. They'd go into North Korea, talk to the North Korean soldiers, come back through the line. They went to North Korea. When they talked to the North Korean soldiers, they told the North Koreans that they were a long-range patrol, that they had been in South Korea blowing up ammunition dumps, supply depots. To prove that point, we'd give each one of them a big bag of supplies, cigarettes, cigarette lighters, wristwatches, jewelry. They loved those Mickey Mouse watches. As a result, we ran that operation for 2.5 years, was never compromised. Yeah, the wealth of information for the Division G2s, for each one of the American divisions, as to what was going on behind the lines in North Korea. For example, the G2 of the 3rd Infantry Division said, I got a new North Korean Chinese unit moved in directly across from my unit. Need to know the name of those 2 units. Well, we sent a small team out. Lo and behold, they'd paint a sign. On one side of the sign, it said what the North Korean unit was. The other Chinese, we simply sold the sign. Brought the sign back, gave it to the G2. He was a lady, and they knew what was on the other side of the line. Those were some of the things that was going on the front line at that time. We ran that operation, like I said, for 2.5 years. Was never compromised. 5th part of the operation was Baker Section. Baker Section was our airborne operation while we were dropping North Korean paratroopers back into North Korea. Now, these were all refugees that had never been on a plane before in their lives. We didn't have enough planes to give them one practice jump. We jumped them off the back of 2.5-ton trucks at 10 miles an hour to teach them how to do a preliminary landing fall. The first jump they made was a combat jump, jumping into North Korea. So as a result, the first guys we dropped into North Korea, we realized we didn't have radios to give them. We come up with a new system. We brought in 250 carrier pigeons out of Fort Gordon, Georgia. Those carrier pigeons will come back to that cage regardless of where you put the cage, because that's where their food and water is located. So the next 10 guys we dropped into North Korea, we attached the pigeons to the leg, a little wire basket. Said, now when you hit the ground, release the pigeons. He's got a plastic tube on his leg. Write us a note, put in that plastic tube. That pigeon will be back within 24 hours. Well, we didn't get the pigeons back. First guy wandered out about 10 days later. We said, what happened to the pigeons? He said, we cooked them and ate them. He said, those pigeons are not going to fly back to Seoul. Then we had to put on detailed demonstrations to show that pigeon's coming back to that cage. So as a result, we got all the pigeons back in future operations, and that worked out very well. After I'd been briefed, they put me on a C-47 and flew me from Seoul to Pingyangdo Island, where you see that little red dot there. I landed on the hard sandy beach at low tide. And we had used those beaches to land on, and 2 beaches in North Korea. So we could land on the hard sandy beaches at low tide. When I landed, I met my new commander, Major McKeon. Major McKeon indicated that he was going to assign me to the Italian 4th Battalion, which was the White Tigers. That was the name of the unit. He said, you're going to be controlling all the naval gunfire, all the aircraft control, and other things that's in the area. He said, you've got a military leader, you've got a civilian leader. Pak Chol is a political leader. And I worked with Pak Chol for the next year as a first lieutenant. When I first went in, we had 300 people in that unit. I was the only American with that unit. And I was in North Korea and operated off of Walido Island and several other islands. As a result of that, we gradually increased our strength. By the time I left, we had 800 in that battalion. It was called the 4th Battalion. Now, a battalion of 800 is commanded by a lieutenant colonel normally, but this was Special Forces. So as a result, I had about 4 units like that in North Korea that other units, lieutenants like me, was commanding. So as a result, I had that unit for 1 year. That operation was classified top secret code word for over 40 years. It was a joint operation with the CIA. We were both operating in North Korea, controlling people, operations and things going on in North Korea at that time. As a result of that, we had some major operations going on behind the lines in North Korea. One of my major operations, 14th of July, 1952, we had a 76 millimeter gun on the mainland of North Korea, and run it out of a mountain, fired on the ships at sea, put it back in the mountain. We could not destroy that gun. Results, we had to go in and take out that mountain. I trained 120 North Koreans. I put them on 4 old Chinese sail junks at midnight. We eased in behind that mountain. I was the only American on that operation. We eased in behind that mountain, undetected. The next morning, just as the sun was coming up, we had a British frigate sitting in the harbor. My new boss, Major Tom Dye, was on board. I called in my first fire mission to him. He started firing on the top of that mountain. That was primarily to drive security in the ground, so they wouldn't see us climbing up the back of that mountain. They still didn't know we were there. We got about 3/4 of the way up before the first sentry popped his head up and saw us. We started taking some fire, taking some casualties. I had 3 Marine Corsair aircraft, orbiting about 5 miles out. I got on the radio, brought them in one at a time. They started hitting the top of that mountain with rockets, machine gun fire. We went in after the 3rd raid into the top of the mountain. We ended up killing and wounded more than 60 of the North Koreans. We had 6 killed, 7 wounded. We blew up that mountain, blew up that gun. The mountain smoked for about a week. As a result of that, we got counterattacked. It forced us back to the beach to get on our boats. We got back to the beach. Here was 40 civilians trying to get out of North Korea from a village. They'd seen the fighting, and so they were trying to get out of North Korea. As a result, we couldn't take 40 civilians. It would have swamped our boats. So we agreed to take 10. So we put the other 30 back to the village, said, we'll try to get you out at a later date. We put the 10 on board our boats. We went by the British frigate sitting in the harbor. They looked down almost in disbelief as to what they'd been supporting. Here was 4 old Chinese sail junks, looked like they were built in 1800. All our guerrillas dressed in black. 10 civilians on top of the boat with all pots and pans. And behind the last boat, we had 6 oxen that we'd stolen in North Korea that we were bringing back to Pak Cho's Island. That was a day in the operations of guerrilla forces in North Korea. We had a lot of other operations going on at that time. When I got back to Walido, the island, I had a call from Jim Mapp. Jim Mapp was our northernmost lieutenant up near the Yellow River. He said he had just rescued Colonel Albert Shins. Colonel Albert Shins was an Air Force full colonel, had been shot down in North Korea. He had bailed out, got on a small island. He'd been on that island for 40 days. Had lost about 40 pounds. All he had to eat was a few fish that he'd caught. Jim said he saw a fire on that island late one afternoon. He sent 2 of his agents ashore. They eased up to that fire. He was an Air Force colonel sitting on a log. They didn't speak any English. He didn't speak any Korean. They took him down, took his .38. He thought he was a prisoner. They brought him back out to the boat. Here he met 6'4" Jim Mapp, University of Georgia football player. He was elated to be rescued. Jim said he had a dozen eggs left in his supply. Said the colonel ate all his eggs. He said he had a half bottle of Scotch whiskey left. Colonel drank a sizable portion of his Scotch. He then got him back to Chodo, and the Air Force picked him up, took him back to Seoul. He remained in country for about 3 months. He was a big help to Jim and I. We had already been identified over the Pyongyang radio by name as being agents in North Korea, and we would not be treated as prisoners of war if we were captured. So he sent Jim and I 2 ID cards, Air Force type. We changed our name. Thank goodness we didn't have to try to use those ID cards. And anyway, he would send Jim up 3 bottles of Scotch every month. We'd keep 2, we'd send Jim 1. He didn't need all that Scotch. So as a result of that operation, it went very well during that period of time. Now let me show you some charts and pictures and things that I brought out of North Korea and some of those I have prepared. Next chart. This is the Kim family. This is Kim Il-sung, the old grandfather, took over in 1947, died in 1994. That's his son, Kim Jong-il, took over, died in December of 2011. Kim Jong-il had 3 sons. His oldest son, Kim Jong-nam, was supposed to get that job. But Nam, in 2001, went into Japan to visit Disney World, and he got caught, got locked up on a fake passport. Kim Jong-il had to send his lawyer to get him out of jail. That upset him so much that he shipped him to China, and that's where he's living today. The number 2 son, Cho, he was not a leader. He shipped him to China. So it fell on the shoulders of the number 3 son, UN, to run the country. Un had 2 years of training in Switzerland. He has some knowledge of 5 languages, majored in physics and computer science. We had hoped that he would be a better leader. That has not happened. That shows a picture made in his black coat right down to the bottom. On his right is his uncle, 2-star. On his left, the Chief of Staff of the Army. He was so concerned that those people were fixing to take over the country that he killed his uncle back in 2013, killed the Chief of Staff and 2 other generals on that row at that time, important time. So we're still quite concerned about what's going on with his missile and nuclear facilities over there. I've got another chart that shows all the nuclear facilities and missile facilities in North Korea and exactly where they're located. And we could take those out at any time. Next slide. This shows some of our boats. That's Lieutenant Robert McBride. Another lieutenant was with us out of the islands. Those boats are deceiving. That's an old Chinese sail junk. But we have gray marine diesel engines installed in those underwater. So we can take out, when we get fired on, we can cut on that gray marine and cruise out at 40 knots. They'll be lobbing shells about 50 feet behind us and can't understand why that boat's moving that fast. Next slide. This shows 2 76mm guns, and that's me. They had 76mm guns. Those 2 were sitting out on a point on the mainland. They kept firing on our islands and our ships at sea. We had a cook that was working in that compound, undercover. He said every night they go to bed at 10 o'clock. They're in a bunker. He said those guns are sitting out on the point. I believe you could come in with a big sail junk and ease up there and be able to take those 2 guns. And we did. Then we took those 2 guns, we put them out on our island. Next morning before they woke up, we fired their own weapons back at them. He said that was a sight. The guy was sitting on the side of the hill. He said that was a sight to behold. He said they came charging out to fire their own weapons. The weapons are gone. He said about an hour later, the commander of that unit showed up. He was so upset until he started beating the lieutenant with a stick. So as a result, we were very successful in bringing those 2 out. We then fired those for about, 2 weeks. And we notified 8th Army that we'd had those 2 weapons. They said, send those 2 weapons to us. So they sent a separate boat up. We had to turn them over. Then 8th Army claimed that they had captured 2 weapons. So we could see why we were very careful from then on as to what we reported that we just captured, because we know what 8th Army would claim that they had actually taken over those weapons themselves. Next slide. This shows Lieutenant Jim Mapp in the center. That's me on the right. And that's another lieutenant was with us in North Korea. That's our pet dog. If we turned that dog loose in the local village, somebody would have him for lunch that day. Next slide. This shows Air Force Rescue Helicopter. That's me. We were given credit by 8th Army, by the 5th Air Force, of rescuing 92 pilots that were shot down in North Korea with our special forces. We had safe houses all over North Korea. If a pilot went down in North Korea, we could end up rescuing him and, before the Chinese North Koreans could pick him up. We had all kind of boats in the Yellow Sea where we could pick up people. And we had that one helicopter could go out about 50 miles and pick up people that were shot down in that time. Next slide. This shows 3 C-47s. Now those are very deceiving. These are CIA's that we used. We pulled the metal fabrication out to drop the bombs. And we hooked up a platform so you could open up one side, have him sit on a bench on the other side, and they could slide off that bench and jump into North Korea. Now, if this was their first jump and they were reluctant to jump, we opened the second side, dropped bench and all into North Korea. So some of those operations were very successful because they didn't track those B-26s. They tracked the C-47 because they figured paratroopers was on board. Next slide. This shows a Corsair that was crashed on the beach. Anytime those Corsair came in and crash landed on our beach, they told me to blow that plane up and get it off the beach. They had nobody else within 5 miles of the beach. So we had to blow those planes up and get them off the beach. Next slide. That same plane, that's me. I've just finished blowing it up. You can see the tail of the plane well down the beach. You can see a missile still on the wing. We didn't even bother to remove the missile. If that missile went off, it just hit the side of a mountain. So as a result, I'll blow that plane up one more time, and then we'll drag the debris off the beach so the next plane can come in and land. Next slide. That's me. That's a British plane. I'm removing the radios off of that plane. As a result, you'll blow that plane up and get it off the beach. Next slide. That's the same plane you see the British emblem on the plane. That's me. I've just finished blowing that one up. You can see a guy coming over, helped me drag the debris off the beach. I blew up 8 planes that came in and crashed land during that period of time. Next slide. This shows some of the items I brought out of North Korea. I stuck those in my jacket, ripped them off a wall. That's a North Korean flag, 3 foot by 5 foot. That's a Russian flag. That's a hand portrait of Joseph Stalin. I donated all this to the Special Forces School at Fort Bragg. I have a certificate from Fort Bragg of 15 different items that I've donated to the Special Forces School at Fort Bragg. They have a room dedicated to me at Fort Bragg of all the things I brought out of North Korea that has been donated to that operation over there. Next slide. This shows North Korean money. That's a legitimate 101 note on top. Those 2 are counterfeit. We counterfeited that money by the bale. They shipped me bundles of North Korean counterfeit money. I distributed that all over North Korea. We had the right paper, the right ink. We changed every serial number on every bill. And we flooded the markets in North Korea with counterfeit money. As a result of that operation, within 6 months, you couldn't spend a 101 note in North Korea based on that program. Next slide. We robbed the banks, robbed the pay officers. This shows after one of the bank robbers, we brought out to the island, we stacked up on the table. We were reissuing some of that money to our North Korean paratroopers. We will jump them back into North Korea with some of that money. They will take it back in and give it to the families and friends. They will spend it on the open market. It'll flow back in the banks, and we'll rob the banks again. So as a result, we were having a major impact. We were having a major impact on the economy of North Korea that probably nobody knew about. We were robbing the banks, robbing the pay officers, counterfeiting the money, and stealing the cattle. So as a result, that operation was very successful. Next slide. We were always trying to get a MiG-15 pilot to fly south. The reason we wanted that MiG, it could fly faster and higher than our F-86s. And the reason it could fly faster and higher is that they had a Rolls-Royce engine. Once we got one, Russia had purchased from England, and had fabricated that and put it in that MiG-15. We were advertising with that little pamphlet right there, said we'll pay the first pilot $100,000 and U.S. citizenship for the first pilot would fly his MiG-15 into South Korea. Well, in September of 1950, Lieutenant No, that's a picture of him when he flew into South Korea. He flew into Kimpo. He came in so fast and so low until the Air Force radar didn't pick him up. Of course, the Air Force claims that radar was down for maintenance. So it didn't get picked up. So it was also Sergeant Major of the Air Force came out to refuel him because the MiGs looked like a F-86. Then he saw that star on the side. Then they put the plane in the hangar. They took the wings off, put the plane in the wings on a C-124, and flew it to the Philippines. And to the Philippines, Chuck Yeager, the famous test pilot, then flew that plane to Ohio, where it's presently on display at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. We paid Lieutenant No $100,000, put him in a U.S. citizenship program, turned him over to the CIA for 59 years. I kept in contact with him. In 2013, he wanted to be interviewed by Voice of America. As a result of that, I had him interviewed by Voice of America, and that's what I do. The reason he wanted to be interviewed by Voice of America is that when he flew south, he was a commander of 4 MiGs. The other 3 turned back to North Korea. As a result of that, North Korea killed all 3 of them. They said they should have known he was going to desert. So he was so upset with North Korea until he wanted to blast North Korea. So as a result, I had him interviewed. We broadcast that interview into North Korea on the 28th of August of 2013. South Korea listened to that broadcast, said it was very effective. So as a result of that, we have now blasted North Korea to his satisfaction. That's a picture of him made last year. He lives in Daytona Beach, Florida. I exchanged emails with him, telephone calls with him. He has a master's degree from aeronautical engineer. As well, he worked for Embry-Riddle University for 25 years undercover. So as a result, he's a great guy, speaks perfect English, married a Korean lady. They've got 4 children. All of them have college degrees. So he's done well since he got back to the U.S. Next slide. This is Mel Newman on the far right. Some of you may remember the name Mel Newman. Mel Newman in 2013 took a 10-day tourist trip to North Korea and got locked up for 42 days. Well, what most people don't know is that he was a member of my Special Forces CIA team, 1952-53. He never should have gone to North Korea, but he'd probably got away with it, except that he was looking for some of his old guerrillas. He talked to his North Korean handler, told him he needed to find some of his old guerrillas that was in North Korea. Well, that was a serious mistake. Once they found out who he was, they locked him up. He was still locked up on 1 December in North Korea when CNN found out that he and I were on the same team. As a result, CNN picked me up with a limo in Fayetteville, Georgia, took me down to the CNN Center in Atlanta, interviewed me live by television from Hong Kong, and broadcast that around the world. That same night, BBC from London listened to that broadcast. They called me the next day by telephone, interviewed me worldwide by radio, by telephone. The third day, China called my publishing company and wanted to publish my book in China. On the fourth day, on the 7th of December, North Korea released Mr. Newman. We don't know the real details, but we suspect, and people said, it was based on my 3 broadcasts and the book signing by China. They wanted to get the book published, and they released him, and he's now back in California. I've had a chance to talk with him on numerous occasions. He indicated recently that he had just got a bill from North Korea for $3,241 for his time that he was a prisoner in North Korea. Of course, he's not going to pay that, but they even itemized the bill as to how much was for room rent and how much was for food, how much was for dessert, and $3 for a broken plate. So as results, those are some of the things that's going on in that part of the world. Next slide. This shows a CIA picture at night. It shows South Korea is all lit up, power plants, electricity all over South Korea. That's North Korea. They only have electricity in one city, Pyongyang. That's the farming community of China on that border. They have electricity in most of their small farming cities. That little light right there is my island, Pyongyang-do. That island is below the 38th parallel. We still control that island in South Korea. When I left there, we had 500 people on that island. We now got 5,000 North Koreans that come in and live on that island. I had a friend of mine that went back up and visited the island just last year. We can go up by high-speed boat out of Seoul, Incheon, and be there in about 3 hours. He indicated that's a beautiful city. They now have got 2 hotels, motels. They've got restaurants. They've got rental cars and everything else that you would think of, restaurants on that small island. That's a major irritation to North Korea, that we still control that island. But South Korea's got a marine company stationed on that island of Pyongyang-do. It's 150 miles behind the lines off the coast, but below the 38th parallel. That's the 38th parallel. That red line is the DMZ. You can see they're a little separate because we agreed with Russia initially to settle along the 38th parallel, so it's not quite the way we end up after the fight was over, that we end up settling along that coastal area. Now, as a result of that, I've got 15 of my people that still live on that island that I work with. Out of my 800 I had in North Korea, 350 got out alive, and are now living in South Korea. When the war was over, initially we had 10,000 fighting behind the lines. Before the war was over, we actually ended up to 22,000 North Korean guerrillas fighting behind the lines in North Korea. When the war ended in 1953, about 10,000 of those flowed into South Korea. The others just simply disappeared. Some remained in North Korea. We've now got about 5,000 still alive in South Korea. I was interviewed last year by Voice of America worldwide. And there again, I complained that South Korea was not giving any contributions or support to our 5,000 guerrillas living in South Korea. Well, South Korea got in touch with me and said if we knew who they were, we might be able to find some support to them. Well, I just happen to have 5,000 names, their home addresses, and what units they're with. That list stands 4 feet tall and weighs 80 pounds. As a result of that, I've turned that over to Sonny Park. Some of you may know it lives here in Atlanta. Sonny Park came to the U.S. when he was about 8 years old and only had about $10 in his pocket. He is now a multimillionaire. He runs cleaning services for the big buildings all over the Southeast. He's got 14 different companies in 14 different states. He is now taking that big stack that I gave him and putting that on one thumb drive. And we fix to send that to South Korea, hopefully within the next 2 months. That gives you just a quick rundown of some of the things going on in that part of the world. I'm going to turn the program back over to John, and appreciate very much being invited to speak with you today. Thank you.
Couple of things to give you. We have a couple of gifts for the Colonel. First, the AWOL book that was mentioned earlier and been recommended by Senator John McCain and others. And then this is a special thing we give to all of our speakers. This is, of course, a Vietnamese service ribbon with our name all on the back of it, and we appreciate you so much coming. We may have to get you coming back maybe when you're 97. Would that be
I'll be happy to do that.
all right. And I'm also very proud of the fact that we are both North Georgia graduates, and he has continued to be recognized over and over and over. He goes up to Special Forces School and speaks to practically every class that comes through up there. And I'm sure he'll be glad to stay up here and answer any more questions.